After you finish watching the show The Office, there's one lingering question, and audiences wonder all these years later, who was the Scranton Strangler? And this question really permeates the entire show, even though we don't find out about the Scranton Strangler until season 6. And although in the show there is someone named George Howard Skub who is convicted of the crimes, a lot of audience members and myself didn't actually believe that George Howard Skub had committed these crimes, and that it's possible he was set up. Many people have talked about this, and fingers get pointed at many characters. There are even theories out there that Jim or Pam or Meredith was the Scranton Strangler. But when we look over the most compelling theories of who actually committed these crimes, we see that the consensus centers around 5 suspects, and that being Toby, Gabe, David Wallace, Creed, and Dwight. And for a long time, there's a lot of blind speculation who it could have been because ultimately we know so little about the Strangler. But the actor who plays Toby is Paul Lieberstein, and he's also one of the writers of the show. And years ago, he did an interview that actually left clues as to the potential identity of the Scranton Strangler. And that clue that he left behind in that podcast was that all of the writers knew, but it was never put into the show, that the Scranton Strangler didn't actually kill anybody. And so he would strangle people and they would pass out, but he never actually took anybody's life. And when we're looking at these 5 main suspects, I think there's a couple people that we can rule out immediately. The first one being Creed. Creed is very upfront about his crimes. He admits to them. He talks about how he's stolen people's identities. He's talked about how he's taken people's lives. And that he is not the real Creed. It's somebody else's life that he took over. Creed in no way attempts to hide his crimes. We see him stealing on camera in episodes. He admits in his interviews to the things he did. So it's very unlikely that it was Creed because he most likely would have told the documentary crew or been sloppy enough to leave evidence behind. And Creed is like a hermit crab. He goes and takes over people's lives as if it's a shell. So if he would have taken the life of somebody, being the Scranton Strangler, the Creed we know most likely would have disappeared and he would have taken on this new identity. So I think that we can rule Creed's character out of the running for the Scranton Strangler. Is Creed a criminal? Absolutely. Has Creed potentially taken people's lives? I would guess so. But is Creed our suspect in this crime? I do not believe that's the case. Another character that we can most likely rule out would be Dwight. When we look at Dwight, he does have the violence to potentially be the Scranton Strangler. We know that he does take the lives of the livestock on his farm. We also see that Dwight, he knows how to fight and how to defend himself, like in the episode where he starts getting physical with Jim and Jim is overwhelmed immediately. We also see that Dwight dresses up as the Scranton Strangler and pretends to strangle Jim on camera. And he seems very compelled by this idea of the Strangler. But I think there's a couple major reasons that we can rule Dwight out. Most likely, Dwight would have taken Jim's life if he was the Strangler, because Jim bullies him all throughout the seasons. Now, if Dwight was the Strangler, it's possible he could be doing these stranglings as a way of getting out his frustration about the bullying that he's facing at work from people like Jim, Michael, and Pam. It's implied in the Paul Lieberstein video that the Scranton Strangler is weak, and that's why he couldn't finish off his victims. And Dwight is not weak. While he is goofy and a little bit of a gravy seal, he does have the capacity to strangle somebody to completion. But there's another reason that I think that we can rule out Dwight as a suspect. And that's because Dwight hates when people get credit for his accomplishments and when he's not recognized. And I think that had Dwight been the Strangler, once George Howard Skub was getting all the attention for being the Strangler, I think that would have bothered Dwight and he would have confessed or started committing the crimes again. Because that has happened famously with serial killers before. When somebody else gets the credit for their crimes, they get angry and start putting out more information, like what happened with the BTK killer. So for those reasons, I think we can most likely drop Creed and Dwight as suspects. Now, when we look at somebody like David Wallace, he's a little bit harder because we don't know nearly as much about David Wallace. It's harder to say if he is or isn't a real suspect. We do know that David Wallace got fired when the company changed hands. We also know that David Wallace does travel back and forth from Scranton to his hometown. But we don't really see any instances of David losing his cool, being violent, harassing, stalking people, any of these things. We do see that he pops up in Scranton at odd times, like when he's at the charity dinner for some reason. And we also see that he seemingly has a drinking problem after he's let go from Dunder Mifflin, when he's putzing around trying to make his suck it invention. But compared to some of the other suspects, I don't think there's a whole lot that points to David Wallace as somebody that we should take as a very serious suspect. While it is possible, I don't think there's enough evidence there to say yes or no fully. Now, a lot of people think that Toby is the Scranton Strangler, and there's a lot of reasons why this could be true. We see that Toby has anger issues. He talks about how the intern is annoying him and he's gonna kill him. He brings up the asbestos in the walls being a silent killer, and Michael says, "You're the silent killer." To which Toby replies, "You'll see." We also see that he's very awkward with Pam, crossing boundaries with her, trying to overstep. He seems very obsessive and obviously has trouble controlling himself, like when he grabs her leg in front of Jim, which she never gave any indication that she really was into him, and he's also crossing these boundaries. But I don't think him crossing these boundaries with Pam is necessarily a reason why he's the Scranton Strangler, considering that Jim was crossing more boundaries with Pam when she was with Roy. People have also pointed out that there's a car in the office parking lot that people think is most likely Toby's car. And when we see the car chase between the police and the Scranton Strangler, it looks like that car is running from the police before George Howard Skub is arrested. And when everyone is sitting around watching the car chase between the police and the suspect, we do see that Toby is missing and everyone is watching this go down at his desk. Toby is very clearly depressed and unhappy with where he is in life. He gets bullied by Michael constantly, people forget about him and overlook him in every way. He's not taken seriously, even when he's trying to do the right thing and help people. People also point out the first time that we hear about the Scranton Strangler in season 6, when Andy goes to get the newspaper of the day that Cece, Jim and Pam's daughter, is born. And we see that it says the Scranton Strangler has struck again. And people think this is because Toby was so angry that Jim and Pam are having their child that he just went and committed a crime right before the birth of their daughter. We also see that after Toby squeezes Pam's thigh, he flees to Costa Rica, and he comes back after breaking his neck, which with an injury like that would take a toll on the body, meaning that if he were to do something like strangling people, this might weaken him, just like Paul Lieberstein implied in his interview. And then we see that Toby is actually on the jury for George Howard Skub when he is arrested in relation to being the Scranton Strangler, which Toby seems overly excited about. He goes around telling everyone, he's very ecstatic, and he won't stop talking about it, which could be that he's just excited that people are asking him questions and interested in what he's doing for once because he's involved in this high-profile crime. But also, if Toby was the suspect, he would be excited that somebody else was arrested for the crime, especially if he had framed him for it. We then see, after the case, when George Howard Skub is actually convicted, Toby starts seeming guilty. He says that he thinks that George Howard Skub is actually innocent and that the jury got it wrong, to which he goes to visit George Howard Skub and is promptly strangled, to which we see him wearing a neck brace after. And for a lot of people, this confirmed in their minds that George Howard Skub is the Strangler because he strangled Toby. But think about it from the perspective of, what if George Howard Skub was framed by Toby? Toby comes in and tells him he is the real Strangler. If you're George Howard Skub and you're sitting across from the person who set you up and put you in prison, and you have no weapons, the only thing you could do to get back at him is physically attack him, and the quickest way to do that to somebody would be to strangle them. But this again would put him on everyone's radar, cementing the case against him. But we also see that Toby is physically fit. He can run marathons. When he gets embarrassed about hitting on Pam, when they're locked in the parking lot, he immediately climbs over the fence, which takes a lot of grip strength to do. Something that the Strangler, if they are weak, wouldn't necessarily be able to do. So there are reasons why Toby could be the Strangler, and there's reasons why he couldn't be. And that's when we look at Gabe as a suspect. Gabe appears in season 6, the same season that the Scranton Strangler is first announced to us. And we see that his first appearance is only 2 episodes apart, with the newspaper article talking about the Scranton Strangler has struck again. And we see that Gabe is a very creepy guy. After Erin breaks up with him, he essentially starts stalking her. He even follows her into the women's bathroom, harassing her. And he's very aggressive about wanting to win her back, so much so that he also corners Andy in the bathroom and threatens him. And he says to Andy that he's seen some very disturbing things and that he owns over 200 horror movies. But Gabe isn't just a horror movie watcher, he makes horror films. When Erin is throwing the Halloween party and she comes to Gabe and says that she wants to make it a little spookier, Gabe gets very excited by this and takes it way too far. He then shows a horror movie that he's made called Meditations on Horror, which has some very disturbing content. It feels very much like the video from The Ring, where it features things like people brushing rotting teeth, a woman's picture with a rat crawling across it. But in this video, we also see that Gabe was the one filming these things because he was filming from the backseat of Stanley's car as Stanley was getting into it, and Stanley had no idea that he was even there. So Gabe isn't just stalking Erin, he's stalking people in general for his own amusement and recording the things he's doing. So is it possible that Gabe was following people, stalking people, going into their cars, following them into bathrooms, maybe going to their houses? Because we know with criminals, they slowly accelerate in their crimes. Like people who sexually assault people tend to start out as peeping toms. And is it possible that he's doing this and then strangling people when he's angry and wants to let off some of this anger? Because we see that he does have anger problems. And this is where we have to go look back at Paul Lieberstein's interview, where he implies that the Scranton Strangler is extremely weak and was unable to actually kill his victims. He just strangled them till they passed out. Well, that would describe Gabe. We know in the show that Gabe is extremely weak. They say that he struggles to squeeze a tube of toothpaste, that he's so weak he can't whistle. And we also see in the scene where Jim and Gabe are interviewing Andy for the manager position that Gabe is still unnecessarily angry at Andy for losing Erin to him, to which he starts asking him questions in the interview that are outrageous, like how many miles away is the sun from the earth? And when Andy actually does know the answers to these questions, Gabe gets unnecessarily angry, starts shouting, and slams his fist on the table. But we see that he's so weak, even a light slamming of his fist on the table hurts him and his face contorts in pain. So we see that Gabe is the weakest person in the show. So most likely if Gabe were to strangle somebody, he wouldn't be able to finish them off, but he does have the anger to attack them in the first place, and the darkness inside him to want to do these things. We need to go back to the Paul Lieberstein interview one last time, and one other clue that he drops in that is he alludes to the fact that there might be more than one person that is the Scranton Strangler. In the interview, he says there's a world in which Toby was the Strangler, and there's a world in which he wasn't. And then he gives away a piece of the puzzle, and he says maybe there's two Stranglers.
Maybe there's two Stranglers.
What if Gabe and Toby were actually working together, covering up for one another, and there were two Scranton Stranglers? And we had something going on like in the Scream films where there's more than one killer and they're able to obscure their identity because neither one of them commits all of the crimes. Because very often people want to look for just one suspect that is the Scranton Strangler, but what if there's more than one person working together? Maybe that's why Toby disappears when everyone's watching the car chase of the Scranton Strangler, and that's when Toby went to set up George Howard Skub. And maybe this is why Gabe is trying to get everyone to stop watching the news. Could the two of them have been working together the entire time? Is that why we see them together on the cover of the show? Because we do see that Gabe and Toby have a friendly rapport, like when Gabe comes and tells Toby that he is essentially stalking the woman that works in the warehouse and wants to tell corporate that he's dating her, to which Toby just very calmly laughs this off, but tells Gabe that they're not going to do any paperwork on it. Are they friends and he's confiding in him? And is Toby telling him not to have a paper trail? What if they were throwing the scent off of each other the entire time? And we see that Gabe and Toby show up together a few times in the show, such as doing the interviews together. So what if they are friends, or at least confidants? Because they even dress up in the same Halloween costume and do a dance together as skeletons. They're more similar than people even realize. Both of them have stalked the redheaded receptionist. Toby was obsessed with Pam when she was the receptionist, And then once Erin, another redhead, took over her post, Gabe started doing the same thing to her. So what if the reason we've never been able to figure out who the Scranton Strangler is because we should have been looking for the Scranton Stranglers, and it was in plain sight the entire time? I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. If you like deep dives like this, please consider subscribing to the channel, and don't forget to like and share it as well. If you want more content like this, I also have a TikTok where I have over 1,000 videos, and if you want exclusive content that I can't post anywhere else, check that out over on Patreon. It's just $5 a month for my lowest tier, where you get access to all of my videos on there. And please let me know in the comments, who do you think is the Scranton Strangler or Scranton Stranglers? Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.